Good morning and welcome back to the NWR Virtual Investor Conference Series 11. I'm your host, Banjo Blake, and up next we have Etherstack. Etherstack specialises in wireless and network communications technology for customers in the public safety, defence, utilities and resource industries. Etherstack has regional headquarters in Sydney and research and development locations in 4 countries globally. Etherstack is the world's leading licensor of wireless technologies for the aforementioned industries. Today, I'm joined by CEO David Deacon, who has been with the company since 1995. Just a reminder to attendees that you can ask David a question through the Q&A panel through Zoom, and we will address these questions at the end. Welcome to the NWR conference, David, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much. No, I really appreciate it. And look, today, what we're very keen to do in this particular session is give particularly new shareholders here a bit of a 101 background on what Etherstack does as a business. We've just come off a fantastic 2021. The results of 2021 can be found on the ASX platform on our website. Only 4 or 5 weeks ago. We're a calendar year-end company, and also our annual report is there as well. And I really do recommend, if you like the story today, please go take a look at last year's results and the annual report for finer detail. Today I'm going to primarily focus on the types of things that Etherstack does, how we derive our revenue, and what the outlook is for those sort of opportunities. We'll touch briefly on some of the financial information further on forward. Okay. Etherstack really operates in 3 core markets, all evolving around essential communications. Essential communications are the communications that are required when the world is not in a happy place, like with floods, disasters, bushfires, tsunamis, and also day-to-day emergencies, police, fire, ambulance, security agencies, defence organisations, and then essential industrial communications, such as when you're moving around trains and transportation vehicles, as you'd find at mine sites and so on, where it's absolutely essential that the messages get through in terms of ensuring health and safety for users of the network, as well as the communities that they serve. So in regards to the push-to-talk technology that we do for command and control environments, which almost all of these essential comms markets really fundamentally are. Traditionally, in the left-hand box, it's been an industry known as the digital land mobile radio industry. It's been governments, commercial users spend over $20 billion a year and have for decades on new infrastructure and terminals in this space. These networks typically go on the ground and last 10 to 15 years minimum. They exist in Sydney and Melbourne, out in rural areas in Australia, out on mine sites, wherever a transportation network is. And that's a very well-established, extremely conservative business that we're operating in the left-hand side of the slide here. There are 2 fundamental trends that are affecting the traditional business at the moment. One is the advent of 4G and 5G networks globally, and the driver for governments to be seeking a spectrum dividend back from telecommunications companies for handing over spectrum to build out those networks. So there is a push, certainly in the urban areas, to move a lot of the traditional digital land mobile radio over to specialised mission critical is the industry name for it, mission critical push-to-talk networks within cellular networks. So that's a new trend which will be affecting the urban areas. There are new standards that have evolved in this, just like the standards that drive the cellular industry. They're done by a standards group called 3GPP. And there is a specific standard for managing this transition from the blue box on the left to the green box on the right over the next 5 to 10 years. And Etherstack is really at the forefront of that with our partner, Samsung. Samsung selected us a couple of years ago as their global teaming partner in this space. We've already posted an extraordinary win with Samsung, with the world's largest telecommunications carrier being AT&T in the United States, which will generate significant revenues for the business for a very long period of time to come. So besides the transition in the urban areas to cellular based technologies in terms of the underlying radio bearer technologies, in the right hand side, what we've seen with the advent of all the new LEOs and MEOs satellites going up is a crashing of satellite bandwidth, increasing satellite bandwidth, but a crashing of bandwidth cost to be able to deliver new types of services to essential services and workers in rural areas, which was not technically possible or feasibly or financially possible before, with the older satellite technology, geostationary satellite technology that was up there. So the digital and mobile radio market on the left-hand side, while being very established and stable and conservative for the last 30 or 40 years, is undergoing two fairly profound changes over the next handful of years. One is in that middle box in the cellular space where we're partnering with Samsung. And on the right-hand side is new technologies to do push-to-talk over satellite for rural police cars, rural ambulances, fire trucks, and so on. And Etherstack, if you look back over previous years, you will see us hinting about development in that area. Those developments now progressed to trials with public safety agencies in Australia, Canada, and the United States, as well as the first initial orders for our push-to-talk technology from particular government organisations around the world. This was just a sort of a representation of what's happening. On the left-hand side today, you've got these traditional digital radio networks. These are islands owned effectively independently by the police, like in Australia, the government radio networks, Forestry, Department of Forestry might have them, Defence might have their own networks, the railway organisations. What you're seeing globally as a trend is shifting the underlying core network technology to that 5G space in the middle. And that new standard known as MCX or MCPTX requires a very specific technology called the IWF, which is a gateway function between those two types of networks. Etherstack is the leading licensor of protocol technology, which is how the devices connect to each other on the traditional network on the left-hand side, with over 20 radio manufacturers around the world licensing some part of their solution from Etherstack. So with our deep understanding of how the underlying protocols in the traditional business work, that put us in such a perfect position to design the gateways that will allow this migration to occur over the next 5 to 10 years. And then, in urban areas, certainly, all of that business, really to a large extent ending up in the cellular consumer space. If we take a look at what that industry looks like, when you take a look at the OECD countries around the world, Australia, like with Telstra, or the United States with AT&T and Verizon as the two large carriers, each of those large carriers in most of the countries will undertake a tender process or competition processes to buy this technology to put inside that network. And that's really driven by government and regulatory push. So different federal government organisations and state government organisations around the world are talking about things like mobile public safety broadband. And so in the United States, there's a multi-billion-dollar project called FirstNet, which is the US's example of that. In the United Kingdom, it's called the ESN, or the Emergency Services Network, which is the multi-billion-pound solution. In Canada, it's called a PSMI, Public Safety Mobile Broadband Initiative. And as this transition actually occurs, the carriers within those countries will need to provide these gateways to manage these transitions. And then these gateways actually then continue to provide extra services and functions from the command and control rooms into the cellular network. Each one of those wins that we achieve, we expect an upfront licensing fee between $2 million and $8 million US, really representing whether it's a small carrier in a small country versus a larger carrier in a larger country. Our first win that we posted with Samsung for North America was an $8.5 million deal, which consisted of $6 million worth of upfront licensing and $2.5 million of the first 3 years support associated with that deal. The support associated with these deals goes on for extremely long periods of time. 10, 15, and even longer period of times is quite typical in this industry. And we'll show you some of the detail of that in the traditional land mobile radio industry, how that's going to move over into this industry as well. And it's certainly those long-term support revenues, extremely sticky support revenues, that have really provided great financial results for Etherstack in the last 4 years, where we've been generating cash for 4 years in a row. We had a fantastic EBITDA and net profit after tax at the end of last year. The addressable market for us is anywhere between, on the low side, about 250 million up to about 750 million. We're partnered with one of the most important market participants, being Samsung, other key participants in the space, Nokia, Siemens Networks, Ericsson, Huawei, and NEC. Samsung are certainly punching above their weight and winning a lot of key contracts for 5G in the Western and OECD countries, which is very important for us to have that really good partnership with them. Besides the OECD contracts, which is our primary focus in the top left corner of this slide, there will be between 100 to 200 other contracts up for competition. They include a raft of countries through the Middle East, as well as South America and Africa. Just giving you a little bit more colour around that first Samsung award that we put out. The support revenues, the actual project's going extremely well. Our engineers are in North America at the moment, inside carrier facilities, installing the solution as we speak. The project's on track, and we expect to have the initial deliveries completed this year, which will trigger the annual support revenue kicking in late 22 or maybe the first 1 or 2 months of early 2023. And that will be revenue that just goes onto that recurring revenue graph that we'll eventually come to in this slide deck. We've been pursuing multiple pursuits globally with Samsung in European market, Middle East market, North America, South America, and even a lot closer to home. These deals really take quite some time to come into play. That initial carrier deal with Samsung, I think we started talking to Samsung on that particular project in August 2019, before finally announcing the deal probably in the middle of last year, for example. Just to give you a bit of a time scale, it's quite a slow moving industry from one perspective, but the other positive about that is, again, the stickiness of the revenues, extremely conservative, and when they make a change, it's a change that's going to last for an extremely long period of time. That deal has already, an initial $8.5 million deal has already generated additional revenues in support of the delivery of that, and we expect further awards or pull-through revenue to come through accordingly. Taking a look at the traditional digital land mobile radio market, stimulus spending globally as governments try and increase, get the economies back into shape, always ultimately trickles down to infrastructure spending. You can see that we've got a who's who of the world's defence companies, 3 of Warren Buffett's first energy electric utilities, including New Jersey Central Power and Light, where we have a 26 site network spanning New Jersey. We've also got a 126 site network covering all of Queensland for Energy Queensland, or ERGON as they're also known. And that network's been in the ground operating now and delivering us support revenues and additional pull-through revenues for over a decade, sort of as an example of the types of deals we do. That market is an all-you-can-eat market for us. It is really about trying to grow and keep stepping up with more wins in our particular geographical target areas, which are predominantly Australia, near countries in Australia, as well as Canada and the United States, where we have half a dozen extremely large networks covering Alberta province in Canada, another province for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, a big raft of networks down the East Coast for the electric utilities, and public safety, police, fire and ambulance out in Idaho and Wisconsin. The RCMP deal, there's just two quick bits of history here in the last couple of years. The initial value for us was 1.7 million. It's already delivering us pull-through revenues already. And the RCMP will go out 1 or 2 times a year. Similarly with Rio Tinto, for projects for them, we had the initial order in 2020 for about $400,000. Here we are less than 2 years later from now, with over 2.3 million booked with various projects using this technology. I appreciate we're probably a bit short on time, so I'll give you one other slide here. This is really where the company's been getting a lot of its financial freedom from. This is where we're breaking out with those support revenues just coming in year after year and growing. It's almost compound revenue growth from every time we put a network in the ground. We get these very long support tails, which is giving us the financial freedom we need. I think I'll throw the floor back over for any questions, and we can go from there.
Awesome. Thanks for that presentation, David. I think we've got time for a couple of questions. How should we be thinking about Ethystax's financials in terms of being a new investor? That is key metrics to look at or to consider. Sure.
Look, I think one way of looking at it is really stored value. If you take a look at the recurring revenue growth, and if you go down your report, you can see this graph going back considerably further distance. You can see that that's been going on for 8, 9, 10 years, steadily increasing at every single point along the way. Every time we get a new network, and it's this stability on the recurring revenues that's providing the stability for us to continue to develop new products and go forward. As we make new wins, each extra win thereafter becomes easier. And then beyond that, when we look at accounts like Rio Tinto, where they potentially have 51 mine sites globally, we're our 3rd or 4th mine site into that at this point in time. There's lots of opportunities for us to grow in that way. Similarly, there's lots of opportunity for us to grow with the carrier relationship with Samsung accordingly. So I'd really look at it as a stored value of the opportunity at the moment. We're making the wins, we're profitable, we have extremely sticky long-term support revenues that will help us grow going forward.
Thanks for that insight, David. I'll just address one more question. You've previously discussed work in the defence sector. Can you elaborate further on the opportunity here?
Sure. Look, certainly one of the things that's happened in the last couple of years globally is a range of Western countries have come to the realisation of the need that we need to be significantly more self-sufficient and repair damage done to the local manufacturing and defence industry base globally. When you take a look at these types of essential communications and wireless communications products that we do, obviously there's almost a one-to-one mapping across into the defence sector. We think that Etherstack is extremely well poised to take advantage of that sector domestically. We've posted a couple of excellent wins with the Australian Department of Defence in the last 2 years, as well as the British MOD. And we have a range of different projects in that space at the moment that are really very, very exciting for us. And it's really good to see finally a very clear commitment from not only the Australian government, but certainly also the European governments, in looking at domestic defence spending and really carrying through on that commitment.
Awesome. That's all we've got time for today. Thanks, David. Appreciate your time and thank you for joining us.
Really appreciate it. Thanks very much. Good day. Bye-bye.